G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today's range review we're going to be looking at the Salamanders on the new and improved Warhammer website. So, let's kick it off with the original helmets. So these were the helmets that came out with Book 2 for the Salamanders, and they're pretty good. I really like the old school Mark III helmets with the sort of just gilded piece of flame attached to the lower sort of lower half, we'll say, of the faceplate. We could call it the mandible, but it's not a mandible, it doesn't move. They're pretty good. The ones with the little forehead embellishment, neither here nor there. But this one, the bottom left, with the snout, little teeth on the snout, and the forehead embellishment, that one is beautiful, and I've used that on the Praetors in my own Salamanders project. Looks really, really nice once it's painted up. And I do like that with their Mark IV helmets, they've got this little slot, almost like the snout of a lizard or a salamander. You know, it's just the two slots on each side, like nostrils, as opposed to the multiple slits of grills that Mark IV normally has. I think it's quite a good look. The head is very, very small, and I have used it on a Praetor that I never finished painting for my Salamanders. But it's, it's neither here nor there. I really shouldn't have used it in hindsight. It doesn't look that great. Then we get to the new helmets, which are, for want of a better word, awful. So, yes, I have a set. My Salamander's adherents in Mark VI use these. The adherents are the Legacies of the Age of Darkness PDF Specialist Unit, which is basically all armed with combi flamers. And you can throw a couple of heavy flamers in there if you feel like it. I just use the combi flamers because the heavy flamer is kind of pointless in the unit. So these guys I used it on, and it doesn't make them look any better really. It just makes them look different. The mark was kind of missed here, and I'm not exactly sure what needed to happen. Maybe it needed more ridges, more segmented plates on the helmet, similar to the Pyro class we're going to get to later. They have, like, with this curved, like, ridgeline forehead plate, they have multiple segments of that, like overlapping scales. That looks really good. This, though, yeah, I mean, it's just the same helmet with the same rivets in the same spots, and they cut-pasted some flames in different spots on them. There's nothing too inspiring here, let's be honest, and even the Sergeant's helmet with the little plume is rather, take it or leave it. The bare head's quite nice though, very stoic, which is, very Salamanders. But yeah, wouldn't go out of my way for this set again. Then we have the Primaris upgrade. So when we have a range which is undercooked, which I think it's safe to say, ironically, the Salamanders are very undercooked, considering their love of flame weaponry. So I point to the Primaris stuff here as especially for the plastic champions you get in the basic box or upgrading characters. Otherwise, because of the larger scale on those and on Terminators, Primaris parts are actually quite a good fit for them. So the bare-headed sergeants, obviously using the flames make good Vexilia proxies for the Salamanders. So if you don't want to just go for a banner, or you want the characters, sergeants, that sort of thing to really stand out, go for the little brazier. I think it's a good look. And you do get the little miniature hammer and such that comes in, and tongs for grabbing hot things that they're forging. All of those are great bits to scatter amongst your sergeants and HQs. And you can even cut some off the shoulder pads that aren't utilising them, and put them elsewhere in the army. I did with mine. Looks good. And the hammers can be cut off at the wrist and used quite nicely throughout the army. And even the hand flamers are quite size appropriate for the Salamanders characters. So consider these all as viable options. Another one that works really well is, if you can get a hold of these, and they are out there on the internet, the shields of the Saurus Guard or the old Saurus Warriors. The Draken Scale shields here are not breaching shields or boarding shields. These make excellent combat shields. So if you're having power armored HQs or squads of assault marines with combat shields, this should be your go-to as Salamanders, because apart from like the ones with the big sort of Teotihuacan sort of looking death's heads and Mexican heads and all that symbology, as long as you go for the ones that are just maybe a couple of skulls or some bits of tusk or bone, like they've come off a lizard or a saurus, utilize those throughout your force, and they look quite good for combat shields for the Salamanders. You can even take sections of scale, mold those sections of scale with like a press putty, and use it to get little bits of, with green stuff, to make little bits of cloak that you can spread throughout your force, just to give them that feel of like the Draken scale throughout the Legion. Then we get to the Salamanders Dreadnought, and this is one of the few instances where I think you can actually just... I love the Dreadnought in its full original resin glory, but it is plain enough a torso, thanks to the way it's been designed, that you can get away with this on the plastic body, which we can actually see here. It is plain enough that it doesn't look out of place. This cannot be said for several other legions. We'll get to those later. But as it stands, this does work and looks quite good, and it is quite a nice Dreadnought. But the original resin one was much nicer. Let's be honest, they all are. Then we're on to the specialist units. So the Pyro class, and this is what I was talking about before. You can see these sort of ridges on the helmet, on the heads of the different warriors. That sort of segmented scale-like pattern that it has, I think that would have worked really, really well back on these helmets here. And with the Sergeant in these helmets, if they'd gone for something like the bib, the scale bib, something like that, that would look awesome, just from that thematic point of view. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. Now, as a squad, I really do like these. They are very busy models, and I painted like 30 of them in basically a weekend. About 2.5 days, I think, spent painting them. And it was miserable as an experience painting that many in that short a time frame, because they are very detailed. And I was also dumb enough to add to myself the extra work of cutting off all of their original shoulder pads, which are molded into the arms, which is a feature I dislike on this squad. Having to cut off all of those and replace them with a 3D printed shoulder pad that I felt was much, much more appropriate to the Salamander's look and feel of this unit. Because these shoulder pads, especially with the raised iconography, just feel very clunky and chunky, and they don't seem like the really artificed, finely detailed smith work that we really come to expect from the Salamanders, because they are an artificed legion like the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels like sculpting six-packs and sort of that romantic era iconography, think Michelangelo's David. Well, the Salamanders are very similar to that as well, except they prefer like organic flame elements and such, and they're reputed to be excellent blacksmiths, because the world they come from, Nocturne, is famous for being a tidally locked world, very much like the moon Io of Jupiter, where it's constantly got volcanic action because of the gravimetric effects in the area, and it causes all these rare minerals and gemstones to constantly rise to the surface, and the Salamanders all work with those materials and mastercraft their weapons and refine their equipment, and that's sort of their focus in their downtime. They're also a legion that likes to hang out with the regular citizens of the population, which is in marked contrast to the other legions who often see themselves as above the citizens. And with that in mind, this squad really exemplifies that, except for the shoulder pads, which I'm not a huge fan of. Something else I dislike on the models is the cabling, the hoses into the packs. I didn't even put them on. I personally have been hobbying for closing in on 30 years now. 1994 was my start, so 2024 next year. Jeez. Late next year, I think nearly Christmas time basically, will be my 30 years in the hobby. And I've built tens of thousands of points of armies over the years, been working with Forge World resins for 15 years plus, and I found them miserable to try and clip and bend and So, no. It's an awful design, and many of these arms, the end of the weapon, the butt of the weapon, is so close to the tank, you have to bend these cables on ungodly, unnatural angles, and it's just a miserable experience. So, yeah, didn't like that. I do like the Power Fist and the style of it. Obviously, the Thunder Hammer is a much better weapon this edition. And I also really like this sort of Falcata-looking power sword, and there's some really neat STLs online you can find of that, which I'll save for another episode. Then it's on to the Firedrakes, who are just some of the most gorgeous Terminators, and they're cataphracti armor, but they don't have all of the cataphracti elements necessarily. Their legs almost look like they could be Tartarus in their styling, but in a good way. Like, it works, and with the gold flame around the lower legs and the sort of Bessigue, the little shields, the round shield up on the shoulders of these guys, these look like actual works of art. Smithing artifice has gone into the armor of these guys, which works better, I think, than on the Pyroclasts. It really looks like each of these guys is in this unique armor that's been just beautifully made and has all these little embellishments, like little flames running up the side of the thighs, and painting them was an absolute pleasure. They also have a helmet which is very similar to a Tartarus style helmet, but with the segmented plates and such on the helmet that just, chef's kiss. Downside of these, though, like I've said with many Terminators, because of the scales that form the sort of where there would normally be leather straps on the cataphracti, these guys have scales hanging down. And that means that changing out their arms to any of the other weapons that they're allowed to take, like heavy flamers, combi bolters, power fists, I think, are an option for them even, power weapons. Yeah, I mean, nobody ever runs that, let's be honest. Everyone runs them with shields and hammers, but you have the option of other things. And if you want to convert these guys to use as characters, because they are beautiful templates for characters, since the Salamanders obviously have none, if you want to go down that route, then it makes conversions a pain in the butt, especially because many of them, the skin cloaks hang over the elbows, which means you can't even just cut off the elbows and rejoin it at that natural joint. Instead, you have to work around the wizard skin cloak, which is kind of frustrating. And even then, because of the beautiful gold filigree flames that are on each of their forearms, that does tend to make getting sort of matching arms onto these models quite difficult. So, yeah. But other than that, this is like a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10 sculpt. And surely, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with how good they look. And of course, the appropriate use of the dragon skin storm shields. They look well wrought, and the paint scheme really does help. And the little bits of rope lanyard with the little teeth and fetishes hang off them looks great, and it's not overdone. So, love the unit. Then we get to character options, and obviously the Salamanders have no current special characters, character units, HQ units, you name it, from Games Workshop Forge World. They just don't care for the Legion very much. But Adrax Agatone, like I was mentioning before, a lot of appropriately scaled parts that work really well with the plastic starter set Praetors, as well as with the other HQ options that are available through, say, Forge World. The brazier off the backpack works quite well, as does the head. And the belt buckle section, as you can kind of see here, you can cut away the entire belt buckle section and put it onto the belly plate of another miniature. And in fact, you can do that with most of the cloak. You just have to chop away a little bit of the rear half of the torso. He also has a little Bessigue. That's the shoulder shield that covers the armpit area. Well, that's what it's meant to do on real knight's armor. Doesn't on these miniatures, same as the tassets. None of them do their job, but hey, it's all about looks, right? Though that bit of plate there can be just cut off really easily, as you can see from the sprue, easily cut off and put onto another miniature in your army. So there's lots of usable parts here, useful parts, and the hammer would look really good on one of your characters, especially a Praetor character. So treat this as a bunch of usable parts, and I have got one, and I have used some of the parts in conversions. So even though it's Primaris, it is quite usable, just you can't really use the legs. And the flamer's not too great either. Personal opinion. Then we get to Vulcan Stand, which is, yep, you could use him just straight as he is, because he's in such custom armor, apart from maybe the helmet, which you could easily swap to one of the other helmet choices, or a bare head. You could use his model as it is for 30k. I, however, wouldn't. I would suggest taking using him for parts again. He's just not, he's not big enough, and it's a lot of work to try and get the cloak off the back of him. He's basically a one-piece model. This is an old white metal model dating back to 4th edition 40k. Yeah, but take the spear arm. It comes detached at the wrist already. I put it onto a Praetor. You can go and see that on Instagram and on Army Showcase I've done this channel. Looks fucking amazing. So, a fantastic part there. And you can cut off the other arm at the elbow as well. And then you have a cool King Combi Flamer type weapon, which again you can put onto another character. And with the little totem on the backpack, you can cut that off, put it onto another character. There's a lot of useful bits here, is what I'm getting at. So feel free to utilize some of those in your force to add some character to your characters. And then lastly, to finish us off today, we have the Primarch Vulcan, who is a 10 out of 10, my favorite Primarch. I really love Horus. This one beats out Horus. Like I've said before, when a Primarch is so well designed that you imagine it, and what you get, what you see, is exactly what you have in your head, that to me is the perfect situation. And that's what Vulcan is. Perfectly sculpted to what I imagined. Now, his rules on the tabletop don't represent it, but we're not here to talk rules today. This model is gorgeous. And he's huge, by the way. He's the biggest power armored Primarch, basically, aside from Magnus, I think. So, yeah, huge. But he's got it all going on. The hammer is definitely Salamanders. It's stylistic, and yet not overdone. The gauntlet flamer, like on Vulcan his stand that he has, that forearm flamer, again, stylized, not overdone. Just every one of his details. It's a legion that has the ability to just to be overpowering with the amount of iconography and so much visualized going on at once. And yet it manages to avoid the trap perfectly. It's just the perfect amount of detail, right down to the little fire effects on the shins, the little almost tribal tattoos that are carved into the armor on the upper thighs. They look fantastic in person. The dragon skin cloak, which we don't get the perfect view of because we don't have a 360 view at the moment, unfortunately. But the cloak, trust me, it looks really, really good. The scales are the best scales they've probably ever sculpted at Games Workshop / Forge World. Like, Simon Egan knocked this sculpt out of the park. And the way he it looks almost like he is defending the fallen salamander on the ground, who sort of seems to be looking up at him, like, protect me, father. And you can see, like, the fallen Death Guard trapped beneath the masonry. It's like Vulcan is stepping down and he means business. I love it. I love everything about this model. It's not overdone at all. Here we see a bit more of the cloak. And even the backpack, the way that the fuel canisters are mounted into it, the flaming iron halo above the head, which, again, hard to get great pictures of because we don't have a 360 view at the moment, but you can see it looks really, really good. And again, not overdone, because the tendency these days would be to have these giant, meter-tall flames coming off the back, and no, it's quite simple, quite, elegant. Same with all of the leather straps, just a few little gold rivets on them, and the little drake's heads dangling off those. It's just so much done right, just so well on this model, and the base as well. The base is a masterclass in simplicity, not just because of the pose of the miniatures on it, but just the bit of cracked concrete that he's bursting through, sort of knocking over onto the Marines below him in fury and vengeance. It's just perfect for who Vulcan is. And his pose is dynamic and yet sort of slow, ponderous, stubborn all at the same time. Like, he has a sense of weight and mass to him. He's not up on one foot standing on his tactical rock like another pro. He's not in a Fulgrim pose. This is almost like he looks like he used his left arm and just pushed the wall down and sent concrete flying through the air, knocking over everyone on the other side. And then he's just stepped through the hole that's been made. He just has this weight to him, and yeah, I love it. And I love the Salamanders, at least looks-wise, design-wise. On the tabletop, it's been very mixed for me this edition. They're a legion I've always liked, but then I can say that for pretty much everyone. And their story is interesting because they are one of the only good guys in the setting. Even amongst the other legions, they're probably the nicest legion, the most humble legion, and the one that is trying to do the most to actually save humanity as an actual concept. Okay? And that's pretty powerful stuff. Anyway, back with the outer circle, thank you all for watching the episode, and I'll see you all on the next one.